Meanwhile, the Federal Inland Revenue Service has called on taxpayers, especially in Rivers State, to continue to pay their value-added tax to it, despite a court order against that claim, warning that defaulters may be asked to pay fines. The service has been locked in a contest with Rivers State government over which entity has the right to collect VAT. But this directive runs contrary to the one being dished out by Rivers State Governor Nyesom Wike, who, while addressing business leaders in Port Harcourt yesterday, threatened to deal with anyone who dared to pay their VAT to contravene that judgment. Well, as that story continues to unfold, given its overwhelming implications, we're now being joined for further interrogation by Dr. Andrew Nevin, Partner and Chief Economist, PwC, Nigeria, and Emmanuel Emenyonu, who is a professor of accounting at Southern Connecticut State University in the United States. Welcome, gentlemen. Good to have you both on Newsday. Now,
thank you very much.
That's wonderful to be here. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Okay, maybe I'll start with you, Dr. Andrew Nevin. I'm sure you're conversant with the developments going on here as we speak, but perhaps you can clear things up for us. The executive chairman of the Federal Inland Revenue says that the VAT cannot be collected or enforced at a state level due to input-output discrepancies. And he also says that the American system we may seek to emulate, federal system, on that level, they don't have state VAT. They don't have VAT operating at a state level. So where does that leave us in respect to the position of the courts and the position of the FIRS?
Well, I mean, we'll see where the courts come out. I can't really comment on that. But with respect to subnational or national governments, I have seen the press that says that a subnational government can't collect VAT. I'm not sure that's actually accurate. I mean, of course, I'm Canadian, as everyone knows, and we collect VAT at both the federal level and the provincial level. We have a harmonized system in 4 of our 10 provinces. And of course, the EU itself, of course, is collected at the national level, but it's effectively one single economy. So I'm not sure that that argument is necessarily the decisive argument in this as we work through all of the issues about what is going to happen at the state level and what's going to happen at the federal level.
Right. Thank you for that, Dr. Nevin. Let me put this out to either of you. It seems like this is quite a bit of confusion, the states versus the federal government. I mean, in your opinion, have you seen anything like this, and how would it possibly play out, in your opinion?
Okay, can I jump in there?
Yes, please, sir, go ahead.
Okay. When you look at the history of VAT, the value-added tax, which was initially the very first country in the world to introduce VAT, was France in 1954. Even though writings extolling the virtues of VAT had been out there beginning from the early in the 20th century by Siemens, a German writer, and Adams, a US writer. Now, having said that, no 2 countries have the same VAT regime exactly. What I mean by that is in terms of what is VATable, what are the exempt items, how exactly do you administer VAT, the rates and all that. They are all over the place. With respect to Nigeria, Nigeria introduced VAT in 1993, and that repealed the state taxes which various states had. However, Nigeria is in a peculiar condition in that when Nigeria changed to democracy in 1999, the laws were democratized, if you like, and the 1993 Decree 102 dealing with tax was changed to VAT Act of 2004. Now, in the course of doing that, the 1999 Constitution provided Schedule 2, the exclusive list, provided that the federal government is responsible for collecting item 58 on that exclusive list. Stamp duty. 59 says income tax, capital gains tax, and taxes on profit. Nothing was said there about consumption tax, which VAT as applied to Nigeria happens to be. So you have the VAT Act, which says that the Federal Inland Revenue Service is responsible for administering VAT. However, the Constitution, which is the highest law of the land, does not give the Federal Inland Revenue Service that authority. So with respect to what the chairman of the FIRS was saying, the FIRS is not law. The law of the land is currently what has been decided by the High Court in Port Harcourt, and until that is overturned by a federal appeal court or the Supreme Court, that remains the law of the land.
Okay, I thank you for that bit of clarity, but could you also help us with your own postulation as to why, if the Constitution, this is Dr. Emenyonu, the Constitution hasn't endorsed this practice of the federal government collecting VAT, why has it sustained till now? And then on the back of that, Dr. Nevin, if you could help us, you say in Canada you operate a harmonized system. Maybe help us understand how that works. And you say this isn't the decisive argument that should sway things. What should the federal government be looking to promote at this time, seeing as they're caught between a rock and a hard place? I'll start with you, Dr. Emenyonu.
Okay, thank you very much. The peculiar circumstance of Nigeria is such that the Decree 102 of 1993, which is the decree that introduced VAT into Nigeria, that decree, of course, by the name decree, meant that it was brought into force in a military dictatorship. Now, when we migrated to democracy in 1999, our structures are still functioning as if we are Nigeria is a country under a single dictatorship, if you like. That's why when you look at the federal agencies like the FIRS, the directives they issue, the way they go about it, we have three levels of three organs of governance: the executive, the judiciary, and the legislative. Like we know, it is the law or it's the duty of the judiciary to interpret the laws, and when they interpret the laws, that is the law of the land, not any declaration by any federal agency. So what it is the Constitution needs to be amended. Until the Constitution is amended to make it exclusive to the federal government to collect VAT, the correct position of the law is that the states should be collecting VAT. And this needs to be addressed because the Rivers State has become successful in their lawsuit, but we need to remember this is not the first time. The Lagos State government has instituted cases against the federal government over this issue. In 2000, Lagos State had to revert to sales taxes, which the VAT law was supposed to repeal. At the core of this issue is economic justice. When you have an arrangement where about 6 states, primarily Lagos and Port Harcourt, contribute overwhelmingly to the VAT pool, but they don't get in return something commensurate, notwithstanding the use of 20% derivation for the funds shared among the states, then you're going to keep having this controversy.
Okay, Dr. Nevin.
Yeah, let me start by sort of looking at this from a very broad viewpoint. I mean, we've had, up until a few years ago, a very simple social contract between the people and the government, which was the people don't pay taxes and they don't expect services, and the government was financed out of the oil revenue. That model has come to an end, and we're going through a very painful transition period to a new model between the citizens and the government, but also, as this illustrates, between the different levels of government and the relationships and how the fiscal federalism will work. And obviously, if citizens are demanding services to education, health, infrastructure, power, security, there need to be the resources to pay for that. But everything works in lockstep. I mean, we know now the demand for many more taxes, of course, is getting pushed back. The economy is not growing, and people perceive that the services are not being delivered. So this conflict between the state and the federal government, I think, is a perfectly natural step in this kind of evolution as we go through this difficult period. Now you asked about Canada. I mean, I think the lessons for Canada would be the following: is that we have similar conflicts between between the federal level and the provincial levels on it. I mean, most of the revenues actually ends up in the provincial hands because they deliver the big programs. They deliver the education, the health, social security. In fact, they also deliver power. Though people pay for power, it's done at the provincial level. And there's a complex formula on that. And I was specifically for the value-added taxes. This was always a provincial matter for many, many years in Canada. And then, of course, the federal government decided they also wanted some sales tax. So they brought in a sales tax. It's about 15% in total between the two levels of government. As I said, 4 of the provinces have decided to harmonize it so it's collected by the federal level and then given to the state level. But all of this is subject to negotiation and to what the government is trying to accomplish and the people are trying to accomplish, what services have to be offered at the provincial level. So if we apply that back to Nigeria, you take what His Excellency the Vice President said the other day, states have a responsibility for education, for primary and secondary education. They can't put it all back on the federal government. But the corollary of that, of course, is then the states need revenue to be able to do that. So we are going to have to go through, whether it's through the courts, but ultimately I think it's a political process to coming to a new fiscal federalism and a new social contract between the people of Nigeria, between the 3 levels of government, and in a sensible way that we can move forward.
Yes, it's necessary to reassess that social contract. Thank you so much, Dr. Nevin, for that. Dr. Emenyonu, I have a question, wondering if the federal government might be, let's say, flouting their orders, maybe even just acting in impunity, flaunting orders when it doesn't appeal to them. Is this something that you can say should be done?
The laws of the land needs to be followed. The Federal Inland Revenue Service threatening taxpayers, it's really not proper. They let the courts do their jobs. Like Dr. Nevin said, it might end up being politically resolved. However, as the Constitution is now, the Federal Inland Revenue Service is not empowered to collect or administer VAT, notwithstanding all the laws that have been made to the contrary, because the Constitution remains the highest law of the land. So, in using impunity in resolving this issue is not proper. We are in a democratic dispensation. This is not 1993. We are in a new era where there should be rule of law by every level and every organ of government.
Okay, Dr. Nevin, we're looking forward now and trying to project where this back and forth will end up. If indeed the federal government is asserting that the input-output mechanism is where it comes to a bottleneck, what can you prefer as a way of reworking that input-output mechanism? They made assertions that if you buy something in, say, Katsina State and sell it in another state, then there will be that discrepancy and who absorbs the deficit. So I'd like you to speak to that. And then to Dr. Emenyonu, Dr. Nevin spoke of issues, he spoke those magic words of fiscal federalism. Are we being overly optimistic when we say that this is the silent revolution Nigeria hopes for? If we can get this right, then perhaps we can turn the ship around. So I want to start with you, Dr. Nevin.
Well, I mean, it's difficult to assess, the IRFS technical position. As I said, I mean, in Canada, we have a system where we have value-added tax happening at the provincial level. The technical details of a company that sells something, say, out of Manitoba and ships it to Saskatchewan have been worked out. I mean, I presume it takes some time and it takes some technology to do that. But I think to some extent what the IRFS chairman is saying, and we all have great respect for him, but kind of is obscuring the real issue, which is the great discrepancy between different states' economic output. And I mean, this is part of a general thing we've seen in the country. Very good trend in the last 5 years is states are starting to take really more responsibility for their own economic development. Every state understands that. Every state has an economic plan. They all have investment promotion councils. They all have dead assets they want to bring to life, something the PwC has talked about. And now they are thinking about how does the tax system support all of that. So it's not a surprise that this has come up. It's become a legal issue. FIRS is making some technical arguments on that. I don't think the FIRS technical issues are that compelling on that, and I do think ultimately it will have to be a political solution in line with what the country is trying to accomplish, what the state responsibilities are, and we're going to have to do it cooperatively. There's no way for the arms of government to keep fighting on it. But again, to go back to Canada for a minute, we have had many conflicts over decades over the sharing of resources. There's always conflicts of it. We just have to find a political solution that shares it in a way that accomplishes what we all want, which is what we want. We lift 100 million people out of poverty. We want the young people in Nigeria to have opportunities. We want them to be educated. COVID's really illustrated we need health care, which again is largely a state and primary health care centers at local government areas, which is another level of government to think about. So we need to work all of this through. The other thing I'll just to finish on is, it's not done in the question of just a single tax. You can't just say an individual tax is fair or not fair. You can only talk in the context of the overall tax system. So that's what we should work on. How does the overall tax system work? What's the relationship between customs duties, stamp duties, value-added tax, capital gains tax, income tax? How do we bring more people into the from the informal economy into the formal economy? And all of these things need to be thought about in the issue of fiscal federalism or the tax regime in the totality. And just to finish again a little longer, the one tax that's really critical here is property tax. So if you look at the U.S. and the Canadian model, that's a local tax. Local jurisdictions have many demands on them, particularly around education, around security, police forces, firefighting, for example. And that's the primary way of doing that. So that also has to be figured in the equation. So it's not simple, but I have great confidence that the country will work this through over the next few years, and we have no choice.
Dr. Emenyonu, is this the silent revolution Nigeria has hoped for?
It's maybe one of the steps in that direction. It's one of the steps. The Nigeria current arrangement, both physically and in terms of power distribution among the three tiers of governance, namely the federal, the state, and the local, it's heavily tilted to the advantage of the federal government. Like Andrew just said, here in the US, the various tiers have their various revenue sources, and you don't have an arrangement where one tier of government will every month go cap in hand to the capital to get allocations and all that. So hopefully, with this development, the discussions will ensue, and we look at the various responsibilities assigned to the various levels of government and see whether they have adequate resources to carry those out, and even discuss the issue of the 68 items on the exclusive list. Do they all need to be under the exclusive domain of the federal government? And how do you get funds to the states and the local governments to do the other things that they need to do? And how can you bring about economic justice and have a system that motivates all the states and all the local governments to be more productive instead of waiting to share the fruit of revenues generated from other states? So hopefully this step will begin really serious conversation concerning the appropriate fiscal arrangement for the various levels of governance in Nigeria, as opposed to what we have currently.
All right, Professor Emmanuel Emenyonu, thank you so much for talking with us this afternoon, and also Andrew Nevin.